There are playoff upsets where the star beats the other star, and this isn't quite that. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar still got his. 27 points, 14 rebounds. The best player in the building didn't disappear. But basketball has a nasty little habit of asking a different question than the one everybody showed up to answer. The question was never, can the Warriors erase Kareem? You can't erase Kareem. The question was, can the Warriors make Milwaukee solve everybody else? On April 13th, 1973, in Oakland, the answer was no. Jim Barnett scored 26 points. He added 7 rebounds and 7 assists. He didn't just have a nice game. He had the kind of game that gives a role in history to somebody who could have been treated like a side character. Because if you beat Kareem's Bucks in a playoff series, you don't get to call that normal. You don't get to file it under a good team wins home game. That's a franchise memory. And for Jim Barnett, before the broadcaster voice, before quite frankly, before decades of Warriors fans knowing him as the guy explaining the game to them, this was the night he was the guy who played it. Welcome back to Sports Lab 100. This is Warrior 25, Jim Barnett. I'm documenting one game per player until I reach 100. Today's game is April 13th, 1973. Golden State Warriors 100, Milwaukee Bucks 86. Today's idea: sometimes the most important player in a historic upset isn't the legend that everybody came to see. Some nights it's the professional who finds the exact night when the whole room needs him. So here's the situation. This is Game 6 of the Western Conference Semifinals. The Warriors are at home. They're out 3-2. Milwaukee's the top seed in the West, 60-win team, and they've got Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. At this point, that's basically saying they've got the mountain. It's not a scenic mountain either. It's a mountain with footwork. And the Warriors are good. They're not an underdog that accidentally wandered into the playoffs. They won 47 games. They have Rick Barry, Nate Thurmond, Jeff Mullins, Clyde Lee, Cazzie Russell, Jim Barnett, and Al Attles on the sideline. It's not a charity case. That's a grown-up basketball team. But Milwaukee had been the cleaner bet. The Bucks had won 66 games and the NBA title in 1971. They'd gone back to the conference finals in 72. They'd beaten the Warriors in the playoffs in each of the previous 2 years. So this wasn't Golden State sneaking up on a team that didn't know them. Milwaukee knew exactly who the Warriors were. And that's what makes the result better. Because this wasn't confusion. It was resistance. The Warriors didn't trick Milwaukee. They outlasted them, outspread them, and in Game 6, they got the closing performance from Jim Barnett. Not Barry as the headline scorer. Not Thurmond as Kareem's obvious counterweight. Barnett. That's the hook. Milwaukee's locker room going into this game had to feel like a team trying to keep authority from slipping right out of its hands. They're a 60-win team. They have Kareem. They have Oscar Robertson. Now this is the late career Oscar, not a triple-double machine anymore from Cincinnati. He's still Oscar Robertson, though. They have Bob Dandridge, Lucius Allen, Curtis Perry, John McLaughlin, and a coach in Larry Costello who'd already won a championship with this core. But the pressure's weird here, because when you're the favorite, Game 6 on the road isn't just a road game. It's an accusation. It says, why are you even here? Milwaukee had already lost control of the series once it got to 3-2 in favor of Golden State. Now they had to go into Oakland and take it back. I imagine the message was simple: get the ball to Kareem, defend without panic, force Game 7, and return the series to its proper shape. That's the favorite's prayer. Let's get this normal again. Golden State's locker room is different. They're not relaxed, because nobody's relaxed before a chance to eliminate Kareem Abdul-Jabbar from the postseason. That's not how human beings work, but they have possibility. The Warriors already know they've done real damage. They're at home. They found enough balance in the series to make Milwaukee guard the whole floor. Clyde Lee's rebounding like he's personally offended by missed shots. Thurman's giving them a body and a brain against Kareem. Barry, still Barry, Mullins gives them another score. Cazzie Russell adds another threat. Barnett's sitting there, just one of the adults. Not a kid. He's not happy to be here. He's in his 7th NBA season. He's already been a Celtic, a Rocket, a Trailblazer, now a Warrior. He's seen the league from multiple angles. He's been a scorer before. In Portland's first season, he averaged 18.5 points a game. Once put up 42 against Seattle. So he's not somebody discovering in real time that he can play. He knows. And this is the perfect kind of Barnett game. Not a game where he has to be the franchise. It's a game where he has to be sharper than the defense expects. That's a dangerous guy. The NBA in mid-April 1973 is sitting in a pretty fascinating transition zone. The Knicks are still very real. The Celtics are still loaded. The Lakers are still a giant with Wilt Chamberlain near the end. Kareem, already the league's central force. But the league's not fully become his yet. The ABA is also still out there changing the sport's imagination with pace, flair, and players the NBA will eventually have to absorb. The playoff format had also changed. Division winners were no longer automatically protected the same way. The field is being seeded within the conference, which helps create a cleaner best teams bracket. But it also made the postseason feel a little bit more modern. In the West, the expectation wasn't Golden State's about to make a run. The expectation was more like Milwaukee and Los Angeles are the powers, and Golden State is the dangerous team you'd rather not deal with for too long. Then Golden State deals with Milwaukee for too long. That's the subplot. The Warriors aren't yet the 1975 champs. But this series starts to feel like an early sketch of that identity. Balance, toughness, guards who can hurt you, forwards who can pass and score, and Al Attle's managing personalities without turning the whole thing into a lecture. That's very much a compliment. A lot of coaches coach like they're trying to prove that they're coaching. Attles always feels more like he's keeping the room and work in order. Let's hit the bench and the names. For Golden State's, Al Attles is the coach. Former Warriors guard, future championship coach, future Hall of Famer as a contributor. A man they called the Destroyer. It makes modern nicknames feel tame, doesn't it? Attles had been a Warrior as a player in Philadelphia and San Francisco, then became the coach. By 1973, he's already part of the building. He understands the franchise from inside the uniform, not just a clipboard. For Milwaukee, Larry Costello's the coach, former NBA guard, 6-time All-Star as a player, and the coach of the 71 champion Bucks. Costello's Bucks are structured, serious, and built around one of the cleanest central advantages in basketball history. Kareem in the middle, with Oscar Robertson organizing the adults around him. The Hall of Fame names are ridiculous. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Oscar Robertson, Nate Thurmond, Rick Barry. That's 4 players who can change the temperature of the league history conversation just by walking into it. Kareem against Thurmond, obvious all-time matchup. Kareem is the skyhook, the points, a singular problem. Thurmond is one of the few centers from that era you can even plausibly assign to that job without sounding like you're joking. Barry gives Golden State a half-court creator and a playoff personality. Oscar gives Milwaukee control, size at guard, and one of the best basketball minds ever, even this late in his career. Barnett sits in the middle of that, and that's the beauty. This game's full of statues, and the episode belongs to the guy who could have been background if he didn't play too well to ignore. Warriors-Bucks is not Lakers-Celtics, and I'm not going to pretend that it is. The real relationship here is short, sharp, and playoff-specific. Milwaukee had beaten Golden State in the postseason, 71 and 72. Those weren't 7-game knife fights either. The Bucks handled them. So by 1973, the Warriors aren't looking at Milwaukee as some random opponent. They're looking at them as the team that had already blocked the road twice. That gives the series enough bite. Not decades of hatred, just a practical, annoying problem. Milwaukee had been the locked door. This was Golden State kicking it open. These are 2 franchises in the same Western playoff path at the same time, with Milwaukee still in the left before the later conference realignment moved them east. So the rivalry is simple. Milwaukee had been the better team, and the Warriors had seen enough of it. On this night, the order changed. That's plenty. Now, Jim Barnett. Barnett's one of those basketball lives that makes more sense the longer you look at it. He grew up in Riverside, California, went to Oregon, and became one of the best players in school history. At Oregon, he averaged 17.7 points per game and left as the program's all-time leading scorer. Remember, that was an era without a shot clock and without a three-point line, so don't just glance at the number and translate it lazily into modern terms. 17 a game could mean the offense was leaning on you heavily. He was a first-round pick in '66, 8th overall by the Boston Celtics. I guess that's a hilarious place to begin an NBA career because the Celtics at that point, not exactly running a daycare. They're a dynasty. You didn't arrive there and get handed the keys. You arrived there and learned what professional basketball looked like from Bill Russell, John Havlicek, Sam and Casey Jones, Red Auerbach's whole machine. Then Barnett started moving through the league. San Diego Rockets, Portland Trail Blazers, Golden State Warriors. Later, New Orleans Jazz, Knicks, and Sixers. Portland's important because Barnett didn't come to Golden State as just some guard. In Portland's first NBA season, 70-71, he averaged 18.5 points, 4.8 rebounds, and 4.1 assists. He was one of the first real players that expansion team had. He also hit the shot that created Rip City. It's not a normal footnote. A long, desperate shot against the Lakers caused broadcaster Bill Schonely to yell, "Rip City." Somehow Barnett ends up attached to one of the most durable local phrases in NBA history. Then he comes to the Warriors. With Golden State, he's not the top name. Rick Barry's a top name. Nate Thurmond, top name. Jeff Mullins has his place. Cazzie Russell has his place. Barnett's place is more subtle. He's a 6'4" guard who can score, handle, rebound, defend, and think. He's played with legends. He's guarded elite guards. And he's not overwhelmed by famous people because by this point, half his professional life has involved looking across the floor at famous people and deciding they can have problems too. That matters in Game 6. Because the Bucks can learn with Barry hurting them. They can live with Thurmond battling Kareem. Those are planned emergencies. Barnett scoring 26, rebounding, passing, doing all that in a closeout game, that's a different kind of damage. That's where a series upset becomes a team upset. You're not one great player dragging everybody over the line. It's a full roster taking turns making the favorite uncomfortable. For Barnett personally, this is the player version of the voice that Warriors fans would later know. Clear, smart, and timely. Never the loudest thing in the room unless the room needs him to be. So Game 6. Golden State wins 100-86. It's not a one-point escape. It's not a miracle bank shot. It's not a controlled closeout. Milwaukee gets 27 and 14 from Kareem. So again, the Warriors don't win because the great man fails. That's important. I don't like when history turns into they stopped Kareem just because his team lost. Kareem was still Kareem. Golden State wins because the rest of the equation tilted the floor. Barnett led the Warriors with 26. Clyde Lee grabbed 19 rebounds. That's enormous. Rick Barry's part of the balance. Thurmond gives Golden State the defensive and physical credibility to survive Kareem. The Warriors get enough from enough places that Milwaukee can't just solve one matchup and breathe. So the game story is basically this. Milwaukee has the biggest weapon, but Golden State has more answers than the Bucks can answer. By the time a closeout game gets into the second half, that starts to weigh on the favorite. Every empty possession gets loud. Every Barnett basket feels a little bit rude. Every Lee rebound is another reminder that Milwaukee is not controlling the building. There's something psychologically vicious about a guard having a complete game against you when you're built around the most dominant interior player alive, because it makes the night feel unfair, in reverse. Milwaukee can point to Kareem and say, "Hey, we had the best player." Golden State can point to the scoreboard and say, "Yeah, and we had the better game." And that's colder. The Warriors close the series 4-2. They don't need to go back to Milwaukee. They don't need to survive a Game 7. They ended in Oakland, in front of their people, with Barnett as the leading scorer. That's the episode. For Golden State, this was a serious validation point. A 47-win team beating a 60-win team, not a cute upset. That's a statement that the Warriors were more than just a good regular season club, waiting to be properly sorted by the playoffs. It also moved them into the Western Conference Finals against the LA Lakers. And that matters because the Lakers were still a massive historical presence. Wilt Chamberlain, Jerry West, Gail Goodrich. The old champion still sitting there with a scowl. Golden State didn't win that next series. The Lakers beat them in 5. But the Warriors had already changed the meaning of their season. They'd knocked out Kareem's Bucks. That doesn't get taken away because the next mountain also happens to be a mountain. For Milwaukee, this is a bad one. The Bucks, they're 60-22. They're supposed to be contending for the championship. Kareem's in his prime. Oscar is near the end, but still valuable. Dandridge is a major player. This isn't a rebuilding team. This is a title team failing to reach the conference finals. And the loss looks even more meaningful because of what happened soon after. Oscar Robertson retires after the following season. Kareem stays great, but the Bucks' first great era is already closer to the end than it looks in real time. By 1975, Kareem is traded to the Lakers. So this Warriors series is not just a postseason upset. It's one of those losses that when you look backward, feels like a crack forming. Not the whole wall coming down. Not yet, but a crack. Jim Barnett is connected to two different kinds of basketball memory. One is the obvious one for Warriors fans, the broadcaster. Decades of games, decades of explanations. A voice that became a part of how people understood the team. But the other one is stranger and maybe cooler. He's also connected to Rip City. Not as a broadcaster, as the player whose shot triggered the phrase. That's wild. Think about how many NBA players have good careers and then disappear into stat pages. Barnett doesn't. He leaves little fingerprints everywhere. Oregon scoring history, first-round pick, Celtics dynasty proximity, Portland expansion history, the accidental birth of Rip City, playoff closeout game against Kareem's Bucks, then decades as the Warriors analyst. It's not one career, that's basketball migration. And it's exactly why this series works for me. Because the point of Sports Lab 100 is not just who scored the most. It's how one game can open up a whole basketball life. Jim Barnett's box score on April 13th, 1973 is 26, 6, and 7. But the real stat is that you can pull one thread and end up with the Celtics, Oregon, Portland, Golden State, Kareem, Barry, Thurmond, Rip City, and the entire soundscape of Warriors basketball on television. That's one hell of a thread. Also, quite frankly, is an elite broadcaster verbal tick. Not annoying or fake, just professorial enough to warn you that a clean basketball thought's about to arrive. There weren't any post-game conferences in 1973. The write-up didn't really have very much. The Chronicle later historical write-up gives us a clean contemporary frame. Barrett was the team high scorer, the Warriors eliminating Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and the Bucks, and the upset context of Golden State beating a Milwaukee team that had handled them in the previous two postseasons. That's really enough to keep the story honest. For 1973, sometimes that's the deal. You don't always get a modern press conference where every player gives you 3 polished paragraphs and a sponsored water bottle sits in front of the microphone. Sometimes you get the box score, the standings, the newspaper account, and the shape of the thing. The shape is clear. Golden State closed the door, and Barnett's fingerprints were on the handle. After this, Golden State advanced to the Western Conference Finals and lost to the Lakers in 5 games. That could sound like a come-down, but I don't think it should. The 1973 Warriors ran into one of the league's old powers after knocking out one of its newer ones. That's a brutal path. Bucks, then Lakers. Kareem, then Wilt and West. It's not a playoff racket. That's a museum with elbows. By its own standard, Milwaukee went home early. For a 60-win team, losing in the conference semifinals is not, well, we had a nice year. It's failure. Maybe it's not disgrace. Losing to a good team like the Warriors, not disgraceful, but it's definitely a failure relative to their expectation. Eventually, the Knicks win the championship, beating the Lakers in the finals. So the league ends with New York on top, LA in second, Boston still huge, Milwaukee frustrated, and Golden State having made a real postseason dent without finishing the job. That's a very 70s NBA sentence. Lots of power, lots of weirdness, no easy path. For Barnett, the NBA career continued through 1977. He played for the Warriors, then the New Orleans Jazz, the Knicks, and the Philadelphia 76ers. But the larger Barnett story becomes the second career. He moved into broadcasting and eventually became one of the defining Warriors voices. He called games for decades. Fans trusted him because he didn't sound like he was performing basketball knowledge. He sounded like he lived it, stored it, organized it, and he's now handing it to you in usable form. To be fair, that's exactly what happened. And that's where this game gets even better. Because when a former player becomes a long-term broadcaster, it's easy for younger fans to know the voice before they knew the player. Barnett becomes Jim Barnett, Warriors analyst, and that's a major legacy by itself. But April 13th, 1973 says no, Don't flatten him into the headset. He could play. He could close. He could lead a playoff team in scoring while Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was on the other side. That's not trivia. It's credentials. Quite frankly, that's the whole point. So what's the lesson of the Jim Barnett game? It's not that the Warriors had more famous players than Milwaukee. They didn't. It's not that Kareem got exposed. He didn't. The lesson is that a playoff upset usually needs a second layer. Sure, the star has to do star things. The center had to survive the impossible matchup. The rebounders had to make possessions real, and the coach had to keep everybody connected. But then somebody else has to step up into the open space and make the favorite pay for not fearing him enough. That's Barnett. 26 points, 7 boards, 7 dimes, series over. The longer you look at it, the more fitting it gets. Smart player, smart game. A complete guard has a complete night. And a future broadcaster leaving behind a box score that still explains itself. Warriors 100, Bucks 86. Golden State advances, Milwaukee goes home. Jim Barnett gets the kind of night that turns a good career into a story worth stopping on. That's it for this episode of Sports Lab 100. I'm documenting one game per player until I reach 100. Today was Warrior 25, Jim Barnett, April 13th, 1973. The night Golden State knocked out Kareem's Bucks, and Barnett was not a footnote. He was the leading scorer in the clincher. Like, subscribe, and keep building the archive with me because every team has 100 stories. Some of them are superstars. Some of them are role players. Some of them are Jim Barnett, standing in the middle of a playoff upset, quietly making sure history has to say his name. Next time we move from Warrior 25 to Astro 50. That means Jeff Bagwell. May 29th, 1996. Bagwell is one of those players where the swing, the stance, the forearms, the geometry of the whole thing becomes part of the memory. But the real fun with Bagwell is that the weirdness was attached to terrifying production. So next time we're going to Houston. We're going to the Astrodome. We're going to one of the central Astros of the entire project, Astro 50, Jeff Bagwell. That's next.